Morning children. Today we are studying about pollination. What is meant by pollination? You might have studied in the earlier classes, maybe in the 8th standard and all you have studied. What is meant by pollination? The transfer of these pollen grains from the anther to the stigma is called as pollination. So once more, the transfer of anther, that is the male cell, to the female part of the plant, that is to the stigma, that is called as pollination. And this pollination, you can see that usually it is of three types of pollination. You can see that in the first type, the pollen grains, this is a plant, say for example, and here you can see the flower. So here you can see that all the parts you know. So here transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same plant. It is same flower. It is called as, you can see that, autogamy. Autogamy means the transfer of pollen grains from the same flower to the same flower. That is called as autogamy. Same flower's anther to the same flower's stigma is called as autogamy. Second one is called as gaetogamy, that is, you can see that the transfer of anther from one flower to another flower of the same plant. Say for example, here from this flower, it is transferring, because the same plant, this is transferring to this flower. The flowers belongs to the same plant. So that is what is called as what? Gaetogamy. And third one is called as allogamy. You can see that, otherwise called as cross-pollination. That is, from this flower to another plant, same species, another plant, if it is passing, that is called as what? Called as allogamy. So three types it is there. One is called as autogamy, gaetogamy and allogamy. Autogamy is the transfer of pollen grains from one flower to the same flower, whereas gaetogamy is the process of transfer of pollen grains from one flower to the another flower of the same plant. And third one is called as allogamy. There you can see that the anther transfer from one flower to another plant's flower of the same species. So the three terms you understood in the case of pollination. And you can see that these pollen grains, last class you have studied about pollen grains, that is produced in the anther of a plant. You can see anther, that is a male cell, and their pollen grains are produced. You can see that these pollen grains are produced in large number. Most cases these pollen grains, which are very dusty, very small in nature, you can see that the minute structure, it will be very small in nature. You can see that this is produced in larger number. So first let us study about the self-pollination. How this self-pollination takes place. Already you know self-pollination, it is called, it is the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower. It is called as self-pollination. Or it may pass to the same plant. That is called as self-pollination. And you can see that here there is no need of much more and this pollen grains to produce. Why? Because there is a short wastage only will happen during the process of self-pollination. And you can see what are the conditions that favors for this self-pollination. One is bisexuality. Last class you have seen what is meant by bisexuality. Yes, what is that? Yes, same this male structure as well as the female structure present in the same plant is called as bisexual plant. So you can see that Self-pollination, it is very common in this bisexual flower where this anther as well as stigma or pollen grains and stigma, style and ovary is present in the same plant. Next one is homogamy, or that is also you can see that anther and the stigma both will mature at the same time. Anther as well as stigma will be maturing at the same time is called as what? Homogamy. So bisexuality and homogamy, these are the two conditions which favors what? Self-pollination. Bisexuality means both the anthers as well as the stigma present in the same plant, and homogamy means maturation of this anther as well as stigma at the same time. And now let us see what are the advantages of this self-pollination. It is much surer that the bisexual flowers where stamens and carpels mature at the same time. So you can see almost all cases where self-pollination occurs. You can see that these anther and the stigma, male and female reproductive organs, they will mature at the same time. Next, you can see that in this case the parental characters. What characters are present in the parental plant, that will be preserved for the young one. It is for identity. Third one, there is no wastage of these pollen grains. I already told you, it may be a self-pollination, the meaning itself, it will be transferring from the same flower or another flower of the same plant. So much distance is not needed. So you can see that a very short pollen grains, a small amount of pollen grains only, wastage will be there. Then you can see that these flowers need not be too big or too large, or it do not have any scent. Scent means smelling. So otherwise insects, you can see that if scent is there or if it is very big in size and fully colored, bright color is there, insect will be attracted. Here there is no such case because their self-pollination occurs. So there is no need of that the size of the flower should be big, or it should be more brightly colored, or it should be having more scent. So such conditions are not necessary for self-pollination. Another thing that you can see that it gives a great economy to the plant. How it gives a great economy to the plant? Yes. Otherwise, already I told you, it has to produce big flowers, it has to produce more scent, etc. So, in this absence, it is very economical for the plant. So, these are the advantages of self-pollination. Once more, what are the advantages? First one, it is surer that in most of the bisexual plants, you can see pollination is most sure case. And you can see that parental characters, what are the characters are there in the parent plant, that will be preserved for the next generation. And you can see third one, there is no wastage of pollen grains as it does not need to move to a far distance. And the fourth one, and it should not be large and showy. The flowers should not be large and showy as there is no need of attracting any insect. And nectars also, you can see that the scent also, no need of producing much fragrance or scent from the flowers. And the sixth thing is that it is more economical to the plant. Now, just like in every case there is advantages, here for self-pollination there are certain disadvantages also. You can see that first, what is the first disadvantage? That is weakening of the variety of the species, because you can see the same genetic code is continuously going generation after generation. So you can see after certain period of time that weakening of the variety of the species may take place. So, and you can see that if any weaker, second thing, that any weaker or defective character is there, that will be transferred from generation to generation. That is the second disadvantage. And you can see that, so what is the third disadvantage is that it does not yield any new variety. So there is no possibility in the case of self-pollination there is no possibility that a new variety is forming. Got it? What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of this self-pollination to these plants? Now let us go to the second type of pollination, that is called as cross-pollination. As you know, what is meant by cross-pollination? Pollen grains of one plant transfer from one flower to another flower of a different plant, another plant of the same species. So, same species plant, same type of two plants are growing in a garden. You can see pollen grains that transfer from this plant to another plant of the same species, same kind of plant. That is what is called as cross-pollination. And what are the advantages of cross-pollination? First thing, the offspring are healthier. Offspring means the young one produced by this type of pollination, that is by cross-pollination. They are very healthier in nature, and the seed producers are abundant and viable. Means seed producers, you can see that it is more in number due to cross-pollination. Seed produced will be more in number, and it is viable means will be able to germinate. And third advantage is that new varieties are formed. So you can see that as it belongs to two different plants of the same species, you can say that there is a possibility, not in all cases, but still there is a possibility that new varieties of plants will be forming. So just like what the disadvantages also is there for this cross-pollination. First thing is that pollination is not always certain. Means we cannot say that this pollination, it will take place. There may be a lot of reason for behind that one. Sometimes heavy wind or pollinating agent is not there, means at the same time when the flower mature, you can see that no agents are there for pollination. It may not take place. So we can say that this pollination is not always certain or sure in the case of cross-pollination. And here you can see that a lot of wastage of pollen. You can see, say for example, in one flower, you can see an insect is sitting. The pollen grains are sticking on its legs. And when it moves to another plant, which is little bit far, you can see while it is flying, there will be lot of wastage of pollen grains. Like that, just you think here the wind is carrying, another agent is wind. You can see there is when it reaches to another plant of the same species, wastage will happen. So, second is the disadvantage is that wastage of pollen grains. And third one is that it is uneconomical for the plant. Why it is uneconomical for the plant? You know that it has to produce flower in bigger size, and it should be more colorful, and it should produce nectar or scent also it has to produce. Then only these agents, say for example, insect will be attracted either by the color, bright color, or by its scent. So if this is absent in a flower, it is automatically, you can say that it will not be attracted. So you can see that the plant has to produce a big size flower plus colored flower, and scent should be there, nectar should be there. So we can say that it is uneconomical for the plant. So these are the disadvantages of cross-pollination to the plant. First one is that it is not always certain. That is, pollination may not be sure in all cases. If agents are absent, pollination will not take place. Second is that wastage of pollen grains will take place. That is, it has to move from one place to another place. So either you can see wind may carry, or water may carry, or insect may carry, or sometimes animals may carry. In all these cases, there is wastage of pollen grains. And third disadvantage is that it may be uneconomical to the plant. So you can see that always nature favors cross-pollination. How nature favors cross-pollination? Yes, what are the processes by which nature favors cross-pollination? you can see that unisexuality. Last class you have seen bisexuality as well as unisexuality. What is meant by unisexuality? The plants, you can see that one of the maybe female or male reproductive organ only present in the flower. In one flower, one reproductive organ is absent. Such flower is called as unisexual flower. So here you can see that if the plant is unisexual, you can see that the only possibility is what? Cross-pollination only. So the nature, you can see that it favors cross-pollination first thing by unisexuality. And here, can you say some example of unisexual flower? Yes, papaya. You see the papaya, sometimes you can see that a rare case papaya in the same plant, male flower and female flower is different. And most cases you can see male plant itself is different as well as female plant also is different, two different. Like that you can see that palm, you can see coconut plant. Just you see male flower at the top, you can see that a small flower, that is a male flower, and then somewhat bulgy part you can see that is a female flower. So different flowers are there. In some cases you can see the total plants, male plant is different, whereas the female plant also is different. That is called as unisexuality. That is there in unisexual plants. What is possible? Only you can say that cross-pollination is only possible. Next thing is dichogamy. You can see that what is another new term you are studying is dichogamy. There andrecium and gynoecium, they mature at different times. You can say that anther mature at a different time, and this style, stigma and ovary, that mature at different times. So if suppose anther mature at earlier, that is called as what? Protandry. That means in a flower, both the organs are present, male organ as well as female organ is present. Even then male organ, that is anthers, that will mature early. That is called as protandry. So what will happen? Their pollen grains, whether any possibility of these pollen grains to fall on the stigma of the same flower, if it is, that it may fall. But any fertilization takes place or not? No, because the ovary and the associated parts are not matured at that time. So there is no possibility of self-pollination, and it ensures there only one chance is cross-pollination. Another case you can see that sometimes the female reproductive parts that will mature earlier, and that condition is called as protogeny. And in protogeny you can see that ovule and the associated parts mean style or stigma and ovule mature first, whereas at that time anther will not mature and pollen grains also will not mature. So you can see that its lifetime is short, and at that time you can see that if the same plants anther falls, the fertilization takes place, but the anther mature late only, so there is no possibility of fertilization. So here you can see dichogamy, maybe a male part which will mature first or female parts that mature first, and in these both cases also you can see there is no possibility of what? Self-pollination, only cross-pollination is possible. Third case is self-sterility. What is meant by sterility? Sometimes you can see though both the parts are present also, the parts may be sterile, not able to collect or trap these pollen grains, and not able for fertilization. So that is what is called as self-sterility. And next is called as hercogamy, means this stigma, it will grow to a certain height, and anther, for that a supportive structure will be forming. So this supportive structure and associated parts you can see hercos means barrier or supporting structure, and so this ensures what? Yes, cross-pollination. Next one is heterostyle. That is anther and stigma, they will be in different heights. You can see that in the flowers. So sometimes suppose this is a flower, a part I am showing. Here anther, sometimes here down it will be there. in this position anthers will be there, whereas stigma will be in a height. So here inside the flower stigma will be in this height, anthers will be down. So any possibility here? No, there is no possibility. So this is called heterostatic. In the same case, you can see that in some other flowers, here anthers will be, you can see, at a certain height. Okay, and whereas you can see that the style will be down, stigma will be down. So here also there is no possibility of self-pollination, only cross-pollination can be possible because they are of different heights, anther as well as stigma, both are of different heights, and that condition is called as heterostyle. So what are the conditions that nature itself has favored for cross-pollination? First one is bisexuality, second one is dichogamy, third one is self-sterility, fourth one is hercogamy, and last one is heterostyle. These are the 5 conditions which favors what? Cross-pollination. Got it? Now we can see what are the agents of cross-pollination. So as you know, what are the agents of, can you say name some of the agents that which help in pollination? Yes, insects, already you know. Insects are helping. Next one. Yes, birds, certain animals, wind, then water. Okay, very good. So, you know, these are the agents that help in the pollination. So, these are called as what? Agents for the pollination. So, now let me see one by one. First one is insects. So, insects pollinated, otherwise called as entomophilous. Those flowers which are pollinated by flowers, by insects are called as entomophilous plant. And what are the features of this entomophilous or insect pollinating plants? First thing is that flowers are large in size. Flowers are large in size. Why it should be large in size? Yes, to attract the insects. By the size, if the size is large, insects will be attracted. Next thing, it should be brightly colored. As you know, for the same brightly colored only, dull color means insects will not be attracted. And third one is that it usually has scents. A good fragrance will be there for the attraction of these insects, and they produce nectar. Honey will be produced in these flowers, and the pollen grains are sticky. Why? Then only you see insects when it is sits on these flowers to suck the nectar. You can see that the pollen grains want to stick on its legs. So the pollen grains should be sticky, and even the stigma also, the end region, the stigma, the long end region, that also should be sticky. Why? Because these pollen grains want to stick on, easily it has to stick on the stigma so as it enables for the easy fertilization. Okay, these are the, and again the flowers tend to be in a cluster, because as a cluster, this you can see as a group, these flowers has to be formed. Then only suppose it is small in size, insects may not be attracted by these flowers, so it should be in cluster. So these are the conditions which favors what? Yes, insects for the pollination. First thing that it should be large, it should be brightly colored, and then it should be producing scent, and it should produce the nectar. It should be sticky, that is pollen grain should be sticky, as well as nectar also, stigma also should be sticky. And the next thing is that it should be produced in clusters, means in a group it should be produced. Got it? So, if the plant is pollinated by an insect, it is called as entomophilous plant. Next, you can see that which pollen, second agent is called, the first one is insect. Second one one is wind. Now let us see what are the features that helps the wind to pollinate these pollen grains. So from the name itself, you know, if anything want to pollinate or want to fly in the wind, it should be light in nature. So you can see that it should be, the flowers should be, usually it will be small in size, and again you can see that they are not brightly colored. What it is in this insect case, quite opposite. You can see that it is not brightly colored. Then it do not produce any scent because there is no need of attracting the insect. So no need of scent, and they do not produce any scent. And you can see that they usually these anthers, it should be long in nature so that when wind blows, it will be easy to carry away by wind, and it will be very loosely attached to the plant. Why it is loosely attached to the plant? Because you can see if it is loosely attached only, what will happen? Easily it may move away by the wind. And they have to produce in large quantities. Why it need to produce in large quantities? It has to produce in large quantities. Because there is a lot of wastage of these pollen grains. Wastage of pollen grains may take place. So you can say that there is these pollen grains has to produce in large quantities. And then what should be the nature of the pollen grain? It should be light, it is dry and smooth. Then only it can be easily carried away by the wind. So feathery and hangout stigmas are needed, because the stigma also should be long and feathery. Then only when wind blows, it can trap that pollen grains into that one. So these are the features for the wind pollinated flowers parts. You can see the flowers should be small in size, and it will not be brightly colored, and it do not produce any nectar. There is no need of producing the nectar. And these anthers should be long and it should be hang out, and it should be large and loosely attached so that wind can easily carry it, and it should be produced in large quantities, that because there is wastage will be happening. Then you can see the stigmas also should be feathery and hang out. These are the features of what? Yes, wind pollinated flowers. Next, go to the water pollination. The third agent is water. So the third agent is water. And here also you can see that the pollen grains should be produced in large quantities. Why the pollen grains should be produced in large quantities? While these pollen grains move in water, you can see definitely there will be a lot of wastage will happen. So whichever flower in that water pollination takes place, it should produce a large quantity of pollen grains. And in some plants, the pollen grains have specific gravity, so that almost it floats on the just below the surface of the water. So if the gravity is almost same as that of water, it will flow just below the surface of the water. It will flow. And you can see that in Vallisneria, you can see in the figure clearly on the top of the water, the male structures, the pollen grains are floating on the top of the water. Suppose till here water is there, these pollen grains will be floating here on the top, and here the plants will be growing, and at the time of maturation you can see that stigma will grow till it reaches here. Okay, stigma will grow till it reaches here. When these are floating, you can see there is a possibility of these pollen grains falling into the stigma, and thus fertilization takes place. So you can see that hydrophilus, otherwise called as water pollination. What are the conditions? Pollen grains should be produced in large quantities, and again the specific gravity of this pollen grain should be almost equal to the gravity of the water, so that you can see that flowers will be, this female part will be just below the surface of the water so that pollen grains can come and stick on that one. Example, Vallisneria. Next you can see that in bird also help in pollination, that is called as ornithophyly, birds. Fourth one is called as birds which help in pollination, that is called as ornithophyly. And in some other cases you can say that this help by elephant. So you may wonder how elephant will help in the pollination of these plants. Which is the biggest plant, children? Biggest flower? Yes, Rafflesia. So this Rafflesia plant flower is the biggest flower, and it just, you can see, it will touch the ground, just above the ground it is a big flower is forming. And here you can see that there is no other possibility that when elephants walk on that one, it steps on that one, these anthers will be sticking on the flowers of this Rafflesia, and so that when it walks and reaches another flower, it may fall on the stigma of this Rafflesia plant. So this type of pollination that happens by elephants is called as elephophily. So fifth one is, so here you can see that these are the different agents of pollination. So first one is insect pollination. What are the features of the flower I told you. Next one is wind pollination, how pollination is affected by wind. Third one is pollination by water, otherwise hydrophilus. By birds it is called as ornithophilus, and by elephant, elephophilus. So these are the different ways by which these flowers get pollinated. Then next term is artificial pollination. Have you heard of artificial pollination? Yes, this is artificial pollination, means if pollination done by man artificially, it is called as artificial pollination. You might have heard about a vanilla plant and all. In vanilla, you can see that early morning these farmers, they will go to their field and they will collect these pollen grains from the flower, and they will stick these pollen grains on the stigma. You might have noticed that one. So here what is happening, it's actually with the artificial pollination, that is pollination by man. It takes place there. This is called as artificial pollination. Next, some examples of pollination. How this pollination takes place in pea plants, seed pea plant. So can you say what is the agent of the pollination here? Yes, it is by the insect. So you can see that it is having pea plant, it having how many petals? It is 5 petals it is there. And already you have studied that, studying about androecium, you have studied about the androecium is of different types. It may be single or it may be united. So you can see that here in pea plant, one anther, you can see it is in bundle. So 10 anthers will be there, and you can see one anther will be separate like this, and the other 9 like this. This will be in a group. Other 9, here I am showing only 5 plus 1, but this will be 9. Okay, 9, these are 9 in number, this is 1 in number. And this will be fully, it is a tube-like structure, in that you can see. And this will be fully covered by what? These petals. When an insects come, you can see that there are 3 types of petals are there. That standard petal, one big petal is there, then 2 wing petals are there, and then a keel petal is also there. So you can see this, when an insect sits on these flowers, the pea plant, for sucking the nectar, you can see that these petals will be pressed down by the leg of these insects, and you can see that the insect suck the nectar. At the same time, these pollen grains will be sticking. These pollen grains will be sticking to the leg of the insects, and when it visits another flower of the same species, of the same plant, you can see pollination will be affected. And next, another example about maize plant, that is usually maize plant, you can see it has long feathery this inflorescence at the top of the plant. So the maize plant, you can see it's a monopod plant, and leaves are also long. At the end, here leaves will be long like this. And the plant end region, you can see here the pollen grains, the male flowers will be, male flowers is different, female flowers is different. Male flower is formed at the tip region of the plant, whereas the female flowers at the axil of the leaf, you can see that female flowers are formed like this. So female flowers are formed at the base of these leaves, whereas male flower will be formed at the tip here. It is long and feathery. You can see easily when wind comes, you can see that these pollen grains will be detached or separated from the plant. And you can see that if it falls, sometimes you can see the wind from here and then may fall to this region. It may reach this stigma, so or it may fall to another plant of the same species. That is, you can see that self-pollination may take place. So long and feathery, it's a group of flowers or inflorescence. You can see it is here wind pollination takes place. Next, how this fertilization takes place in plants. So fertilization means this union of the male and female gamete is called as fertilization. So union of male and female gamete is called as what? Fertilization. So, then you know, pollination is the term transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma. When it falls on the stigma, how these pollen grains pass through the stigma, reaches the ovary and unite that process is called as fertilization. And here in flowering plants, the pollen grain is the male gamete, and inside the ovary, ovule is the female gamete. So, you can see that male, it is pollen grain. Here it is female, it is ovule. So, male, it is pollen grain, and female, it is the ovule. And now let us see the pollen grain. You can see that it has a double wall. The pollen grain, it has a double wall which is called as exine and intine. You can see pollen grains, a large structure here. You can see that. So this is called as exine. And this is called as intine. So each pollen grain has two parts. The outer part is called as an exine, and the inner part, the two walls, the inner wall is called as intine. And again you can see that it has in the nucleus, you can see that its nucleus has already divided into a tube nucleus and a generative nucleus. So you can see that inside these two nucleus ones, you can see one is called as, this is called as a tube nucleus. And another one nucleus is called as generative nucleus. So this is tube nucleus, this is generative nucleus, otherwise called as sperm. Male nucleus, otherwise called as sperm. have got it idea. So this is the structure of a pollen grain. Once more, it is very small in nature, it is microscopic. You can see that the pollen grain, it has an outer wall which is called as exine and an inner wall called as intine, and inside this you can see two nucleus is there. One is called a tube nucleus and the second one is called a generative nucleus or the male nucleus or the sperm. Now coming to the, so this is the male structure of the male cell of the anther. Next coming to the ovule, it is the ovule is the inner part of the ovary. You know, yesterday you have seen the structure of the flower. You have seen inside the ovary, ovules are formed, and this ovule is destined to become the seed of the ovary, and the fruit, this ovary become the fruit. You know, that day you have seen that like this ovary will be there, inside that like this seeds will be there, ovules will be there, and each ovule after fertilization, if fertilization then it goes to the style stigma like this, and here these ovules will be after fertilization, these ovules will be changing into seed of the plant, and whereas here you can see that ovary will be changing into the fruit of a plant. Now let us see what are the parts of this. A single ovule producing single seed or a fruit, and many ovules producing many seeded fruit. Suppose a single ovule is there. A single ovule is there. You can see that only one seed will be forming, and if many ovules are there, the fruit containing many seeds. And you can see that each ovule has one or two protective covering called as integuments. So now the structure of this word ovule. So each ovule has one or two protective covering. These coverings are called as what? Integuments. And these integuments, there is a small opening. Here you can see a small opening which is called as micropyle. The small opening is called as micropyle. And why this opening is there? This opening allows the embryo of what? Pollen grains. This opening allows the embryo of pollen grains so that for fertilization will be easy. Next comes to the embryo sac. This part it is called as what? Embryo sac. That part is called as embryo sac. The embryo sac contains 7 cells. You can see what are the 7 cells. Let us see. 3 plus 3 plus 1 cells. Which are these 7 cells? 3 cells at the micropylar end, 1 egg cell and 2 synergids. Here, this end you can see that 1 egg cell. It is prominent and here. This is called as 1 egg cell. And here associated 2 other cells are called, which are these 2 cells. These 2 cells are called as synergids. So here 3 cells are there. Then next you can see that 3 cells at the opposite end, and these are called as antipodal cells. Here at the opposite end 1, 2, 3. 3 cells are there. These are called as antipodal cells. So 3 cells at the opposite side which are called as antipodal cells, and 1 large central cell. The central cell is different and containing 2 nuclei called as polar nuclei, and the remaining this part, this is called as 1 large central cell, and this central cell contains 2 nuclei, that is called as polar nuclei. So these are the structure. You can see that 7 the cells are present, 3 at this region which is called as 1 at the center, that is called the egg cell, and the other 2 are called as synergic. At the opposite end you can see 3 antipodal cells, and again in the sac you can see embryo sac, you can see a bigger cell. In that 2 nuclei are present. So total 7 cells are present in the embryo sac. And how this germination of pollen grains takes place. You can see that when pollen grains fall on the stigma here. So here this structure like this. So this is the stigma of the flower, and here suppose if the pollen grains fall here at the correct time of maturation, suppose the pollen grains fall here, it passes through the what is this tube. So here a tube will be forming, in that it will be formed, comes down, and you can see it will come and enter through the tree, through this micropyle region. You can see that these pollen grains will be coming and enter through this micropyle region into the ovule. And you can see what are this is the structure of the male cell or pollen grains. What are the changes happening? You can see from here you can see that it will rupture and a tube-like structure will be forming with this nucleus. It will pass to this tube. So here the tube nucleus and the other generative nucleus will be there. Next stage, again only I am drawing the tube. Next stage you can see tube nucleus will be there, and the generative tube nucleus at the end region it will be there, and the generative nucleus it will divide into 2. Here the generative nucleus now 1 nucleus that divide into these 2. Tube nucleus will be like that only. Follow me. So when it enters into the stigma, these changes are happening. You can see that the generative nucleus divides into 2 sperm nucleus. So when it divides into 2, these 2 nucleus are called as what? Nothing but sperm nucleus. And this tube only, you can see as the process goes on, it comes and enter through which region? Through the micropylar region. So in meanwhile, when it enters, what happens? You can see that the tube nucleus which has directed the growth of the pollen. What is the function of the tube nucleus? Yes, the tube nucleus, you can see its function is to direct the growth of this to the micropyle, whereas you can see generative nucleus it divides into 2 and each one become 2 sperm nucleus. Follow me. So now it is about to enter into the ovary of the plant. So there you can see that this nucleus enters, especially the sperm nucleus. How many? 2 sperm nucleus. It enters through the micropyle and then it fertilizes with the egg cell. So the fertilization takes place. One of it fertilized with this egg cell. In the middle, what it is there? The egg cell, one of this nucleus will fertilize, and then again the sperm nucleus moves towards the 2 polar nuclei, and then it fuses and double. So one of the sperm nucleus it fuses with the egg cell, and the other sperm nucleus it reaches the polar nuclei and fuses with this polar nuclei. So double fertilization, 2-time fertilization takes place. Once more, you can see that during germination a tube-like structure will be formed in the pollen grain, and as the structure grows, you can see the tube nucleus which ensures the growth, and whereas this generative nucleus it divides into 2. That 2 is called as sperm nucleus, and this sperm nucleus enter into the, when it reaches the micropyle, what happened? Tube nucleus will dissolve in that one. It will disappear. And this 2 sperm nucleus enters into this one, and one fertilized towards the egg cell, and another one moves and it fertilized with the polar nuclei. Got it? It fertilized with the polar nuclei. So here one fertilization takes place. Here also another one fertilization takes place. So this is called as double fertilization. So here two time fertilization takes place, and so it is double fertilization. And now we can say that once more, what is meant by double fertilization? One sperm nucleus fuses with the egg nucleus, that is the first fertilization. Second one is the sperm nucleus fuses with the 2 polar nuclei, that is the second fertilization. And what is the fate of the floral parts? What will happen to the parts of the flower? I mean the calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium after fertilization. Let us see that the petals, stamen, style and stigma wither and gently follow. You can see that petals after fertilization. After few days you can see a flower after blooming in a plant. It will be falling down. It will wither and fall off. The stamen will fall off. Even the style will be falling off. What happens to the calyx or sepals? It will in some cases it will fall off, whereas in other cases it will be dry and intact. It will be together with that seed. You can see in some cases guava, etc. You can see that dried sepals very clearly. You can see. Whereas in the case of a brinjal, you can see that if that fruit is ripening time also. Brinjal, you can see that the brinjal you are getting like this. And here you can see the sepals, even the fruit matures also. You can see that the sepals will be remain intact with the plant. So there is no, in some cases there is no fall of this calyx part. Then the ovary enlarges to form fruits. Here this part, this part, it will become bigger in size and it will become the fruit. And here the ovules inside this, that will become the seed of the plant, which when germinate goes to the next generation. So the next plant will be grow from these seeds. Okay, so ovary will become the fruit, ovary wall will become the placenta, ovule will become the seeds, and outer integument, testa, tegment and other things, that will become the seed coat. And you can see that these are the fate of the part of the flower after fertilization. So always remember, in plant double fertilization, usually seed forming plant, not only one fertilization, actually double fertilization, 2-time fertilization takes place, and so it is called as double fertilization.